Hello, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I'm going to start with my stats, which I always do, and we've added the last couple of weeks, we added Polk County to our mix. So we're Lake, Orange, Osceola, Polk, and Seminole counties. And basically, sales last week were 885 between everything. It was 1,049 the week before. Of that, single-family homes was 667 of them. Condos and townhomes were 142. And so really the biggest decrease was probably in the single-family homes from 797 to 667, but not anything that concerns me in the least when we're looking at that at all. Basically, when we're talking about this and we're looking at what's going on in the market, we look at everything and kind of go from there. But basically, when you're looking at the median price of everything altogether, it was 367,000 versus 375,000, the week before, in regards to the median price. Now, when you're looking at single family homes, they went from 406 to 397. So when we didn't have Polk County in there, we were a little bit higher. So that probably is something that sounds like, oh my gosh, we're going down, but really we're not. I did go through and look here in regards to overall what was going on with the prices week by week. And when you look at, this is going back to March 2nd. So really like the last 6 weeks actually. So we went from 405 on single family homes, then we went to 385, then we went to 390, then we went to 391, 750, then we went to 406, and now we're at 397. So what that shows to me is that we're really very consistent in regards to where we're at. Not that there's anything for anybody to be concerned about, that it's just a very consistent growth in what's happening or stability in what's going on. So nothing's definitely going down, but it's definitely kind of holding its own. And like all of the predictions and everything for the next year is that they predict that things will go up very slightly. They expect it to go up somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5% for the year. And so with it staying stagnant for the last 6 weeks, that's kind of normal for everything that happens. So when we come up with the monthly stats, they can give us a better idea. But, with us looking at them weekly, it gives us a good idea in regards to what's happening and what's going on out there. So of those 667 properties, there were 55 of them that sold that were under 250, 87 between 250 and 300. There were 200 between 300 and 400, 119 between 400 and 500, 180 between 500 and a million, and 26 over a million. So looking at that, if you're out there looking to buy and you're going, gosh, can I afford something or what's out there in my price range? And this gives you a good idea in regards to how many properties are selling in that price range. And so that gives you a great idea there. Now, the months of inventory that we're looking at right now are 3.39 months of inventory, which is right below a normal market. That's just what it is for this week. So we're kind of in a normal market where there's more, the buyers have some choices and that kind of stuff. You don't have to pull the trigger at the first minute. But if it's a really hot deal, you definitely do. I was speaking to one of my agents earlier this week, and we were talking about that we were looking at what's going on in regards to somebody was saying, well, it's an average of 75 days on the market, which it is. But they were saying, there was a house that sold in 7 days, and really, how could they do that? And so we went through all of the ways that does happen, and it does happen quite regularly and does happen all that across the board that way. And so when you're looking at it, it's kind of a win-win situation across the board. when you can put it under market really quickly. And so I think that that's a win-win for people when that definitely happens. So basically the bottom line is that when you're looking at a property or you want to do something and all of that, you have to look at the whole big picture in regards to what's going on if you're going to be selling your property. And my opinion in selling a property is it's a lot easier to pull it off like the quick Band-Aid than the slow Band-Aid. And a lot of that with our marketing anyway comes down to price. And, everybody's not the same in regards to what they do, but if you do the marketing that you should do, and then you've got the price right, it is going to go pretty quickly. And those are the houses that go in the first few weeks and everything. If you don't have it priced appropriately, then you are going to run into problems. And that's a situation that you obviously don't want to deal with, that you have to have your house and show ready all the time, or maybe you've already moved out and then you're just paying for a house that you're no longer living in. So that might not be something that you want to do either. So we create these win-win situations for people. And, with that, you have to really look at and know what you're exactly doing. So when we're looking at condos and townhouses, like I said, there were 142 that sold last week. 45 of those are under 250, 20 between 450 and 500 and 300. Between 250 and 300, 44 between 300 and 400, 72 between 400 and 500, 10 between 500 and a million, and one of them over $1 million. And when you're wondering, how many months of inventory we have there, and based on the number of that sold this week, we've got 5.4 months of inventory. Now, when you're looking at it overall, we have had a lot larger inventory in the last few weeks. So I think including Polk County in here is definitely putting those numbers down a little bit. And just that small change, or actually it's a big change because it's a big county, but basically when you're adding and you're looking at all of that kind of stuff, it really skews the numbers. So what everybody needs to do is you need to look very locally and in your area and what's going on. I was talking to one of my customers, and they're looking at putting their house on the market in the next little while. And so what we were talking about is really, the strategies and that kind of thing behind it in regards to what to do and how to price it and all of that kind of good stuff. And they do have a very unique property. It's on over an acre. It's got 5 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms. It's got a pool, and it's in a neighborhood that has all acre parcels like that. There's no HOA. So there's a lot of desirability for that particular property, but this property is over 5,000 square feet, 53 something, 25, I think it is. And a lot of the other houses that are selling in there are like 4,000 square feet. And then a couple of them are 2,000 square feet and that kind of thing too. Now, these are the kind of houses that people live in for a long time. The neighbors all know each other and all of that. So when they're not turning over, it also makes it more difficult to actually, figure out what the value and that kind of thing is on it as well. And so we were, just discussing several things that it comes down to it and everything. And they're moving into their new house now. And then once they get into it and they've got this house ready to go, then, he's going to have me over and we're going to put it on the market. But so if you want something in advance, that might be something that is out there that you might be interested in. But my point of all of this is that it really comes down to looking at your neighborhood, looking at the zip code, looking at the city, to see really, how you can really, where you want to be, what you want to do, all of those kinds of good things. So, pricing a property is very detailed. It's very looking at everything that's going on and making the best decision for you and your family to make everything work. Now, before I finish up this segment, I did want to go over one more statistic, and that is the amount of the long-term leases that we have going on right now. Single-family residence, the median price is still at $2,300, which is the same as last week, and condos, townhouses are at $1,750. They were at $1,900 last week. So you can't really say that anything's happening going from week to week like that, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. But you really want to look at the bottom line in regards to what's happening out there, what you want to do, where you want to go, and all that kind of good stuff. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I found this very interesting chart, and I've got to find some place that I can put it up that everybody can see it, but it's Orlando historical data, and it goes back to 1957, and then it's, I don't know what the years are, but the years that we're talking about here are 1957, 1970, 83, 96, 2009, and 2022. So I guess that basically they're adding about 13 years to every line item here. But I thought that it was interesting. So basically, when you look at this, so in 1957, the interest rate for the housing market was at 5.25. The average home value in the U.S. was $18,899, and the average home value in Orlando was $12,220. The Dow Jones was at 435.69, and Warren Buffett's net worth was at 140 million. No, 140,000. Sorry. Okay. So then in 1970, 13 years later, the interest rate was at 8.5. And the average home value was at $24,758, right under $25,000. And Orlando was still at $15,001, so pretty low in comparison to the average U.S. home value. The Dow Jones had doubled between 57 and 70, from 435 to 838, not quite doubling, but close enough. And Warren Buffett's net worth went from 140,000 to 25 million. Okay, so then we go up another 13 years to 1983, and the interest rate for the housing market was at 3.2. Now, I don't remember that. I mean, I bought a property in 1984, so that's kind of dating me. And I know that the interest rates were like at 18. So there was probably something that happened right around there. Because in 83 it says it's at 3.2. Well, we had a big volatility between 83 and 96, because then it's at 7.1. But I know that the interest rates were extremely high during a period during there. And the average home value went from 1970 at $24,758 to $63,948. Now, Orlando's catching up a little bit. They went from $15,000 to $59,654. The Dow Jones went from 838 to 1258. And Warren Buffett's net worth went from 25 million to 620 million. So Warren is definitely winning the biggest increases on these 13 years that we're talking about. Okay, so then we're going to 1996. The interest rate is at 7.81. The average home value in the U.S. is $111,923, and Orlando is at $105,500, so almost right there at the U.S. average. The Dow Jones went from 1258 to 6448. They might have had the biggest increase there. But I think Warren Buffett was right there with him. His net worth went from $620 million to $17 billion. and that was in 1996 for where that was at. Then if we go to 2009, the interest rate for the housing market was at 5.04. The average home value was at 187,295. Orlando was at 187.7. So we're pretty much right there with the average home value now. The Dow Jones went to 10,000 from 6,400 to 10,400. And Warren Buffett's net worth went from 17 billion to 37 billion. Okay? And now we're just going to look at 2022. And the interest rate now is at in 2022 is at 6.83. The average U.S. home value is at 388,238. Average Orlando is 381,762, very close to that again. The Dow Jones is at 28,725. And the Warren Buffett's net worth went from 37 billion to 97.1 billion. So pretty interesting, I thought. But, long term plus quality assets equals a great upside. So the thing that I didn't figure out, because I just thought about it as I'm reading this chart here, but it'd be interesting to look at the, like the average home value and how many times that went up in regards to the Dow Jones and everything. So would it be better to be in real estate, or was it better to be in the Dow Jones and everything? But, basically whether it's a good time to buy or you're going to wait until the rates go up and down. And that's why we've talked many times that it's better to what we call date the rate and marry your property, which means that, your rate can change. So you can go out there and you can get into a property, and then if the rates go down, you can refinance, but you don't have to worry about the house. And when the rates are at the highest, it's kind of a good time for you to buy that particular house, because you're not going to have as many people that are in competition for it as that you would have if the rates are lower and more people can get in it. And so I always think that's a good time to do it. And the other thing that is very interesting in when it comes to our market and looking at it is that there are definitely 27% of our market today is still cash. So that means that people have the cash and they're paying cash for that house. So when you're, it's interesting when I'm talking to people and they are paying cash and they're like, well, I should get a lot off of the price. And I'm like, okay, well, we can try it. Maybe you will or maybe you won't. But you have to understand that 1 out of 4 of you is paying cash. And so that's a huge percentage of the market. It's not like 1 or 2% or 3 or 4% or something like that. It's a quarter of the market or over a quarter of the market. And so just like back in the day that the foreclosures, people would say, oh, I want a foreclosure because they wanted a good deal. Well, the foreclosures were about 70% of the market. So they were the market. So when they were going low, everybody else had to be going low and everything as well. So we're not quite that way right now when it comes to the cash, but it is a significant amount that exists and everything out there. So I think that it's really important that when you're looking at a house or you want to, see what you want to do, basically it's interesting to get into a particular property and see what's going on. I ran into a house this week that is in Davenport and it's on the market for $59,000. And you might think, wow, sign me up. Well, basically the bottom line is on this property is that there is a sinkhole. There are definitely problems with the house. It's not safe to even have electricity on or water at this point in time as a result of it. And there was an insurance claim on it. I don't know what the people got for it, but they're not fixing the house. They're selling it for $59,000. And I obviously had someone that was interested in it. And so they said to me, well, how much is the repair value, to fix this sinkhole thing? And they did have an engineering study. The insurance company did that to figure out what the loss was and all of that kind of good stuff. and it comes out that it's $387,000 to fix that particular property. So $387,000 plus the $59,000, and it's a 1,400 square foot house in Davenport. So I don't think that, in my opinion, that's necessarily a good deal. So you've got to look at the whole big picture when it comes down to it. If that's a project that you want to take on and you think you can do it for a lot less, maybe it would be a good deal for you. But basically, the bottom line is that it does have quite a bit of damage, and it is going to require quite a bit of work to get it up to snuff, and it might be too much. And that's something that I think that, you have to look at the whole big picture when you're looking at things. And I know so many times on the surface you say, hey, that looks great, but you got to dig a little deeper, find out what's going on, and then we'll go from there. So anyway, in order to reach us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we'll see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555. That's 407-566-2555. So I wanted to talk today a little bit about another situation that I ran into this week. And I was showing some buyers some townhouses, and actually there were 4 or 5 of them that are on the market, and they're ranging between like 545 and 570 is what they're all at. And they're all in a vacation rental community, 5 bedrooms, 4 baths, pool, on a lake, all of those kinds of things. So very, nice properties. They do pretty well when it comes to rental, and these people were actually looking at it as a second home. They come to Florida, I would say twice a month, and during the winter and that kind of stuff. They don't come in the summer, but in the winter and the fall and the spring, they're here all the time. And so they thought it would be better for them to have a second home, and then their daughter does some stuff with traveling and stuff, and so she would be more than happy to Airbnb it when they're not here. So the thing came up, and they said, well, there was one of those properties that sold just recently for $275,000. And I said, really? I said, well, what street was it on? And let me look into it, because that doesn't sound right. And I think that there's probably more to the story, and let me investigate it and look at it. And so I did look at it, and I pulled up the deed, because it was, that's all public record and you can look at it. And then I was able to find the people, and it ends up that the person who sold the property is vice president of a company in Wisconsin. The person who bought the property is a president of a company in Wisconsin, the same company, by the way, and the people that signed the deed as witnesses and everything, they work at that same company too. So basically, I was able to go back to the people and say, hey, this looks like it was a sale for $275,000, and it perhaps was, but it's not a third-party transaction. It's not an arm's length transaction. So we don't know what any of the backstory or any of that kind of thing is, but basically the bottom line is that it was definitely, somebody that knew that they knew each other, and maybe it was even, that the company has something to do with it or whatever. But basically the bottom line is that was definitely not something that could be considered as a comp. So comp meaning comparable. So when it comes down to it now, if somebody is buying one of those other units that are in the 500s, and an appraiser uses that one that sold at 275, on that property as a comparable, it could definitely reduce the value of that particular unit. You might think, well, the value is not really there. So basically it is. So when I'm comparing appraisals and I'm looking at it and we've got some kind of a problem and maybe something like that comes up, those are the kind of things that I'm discovering and that I am actually then able to go back and say, hey, I think that this is not something that you should use in regards to figuring out the value, and they would agree when that came down to it, but it might be something that they missed when they were doing it and just go, hey, and a lot of times that might happen as well in a divorce situation, because what happens sometimes is that it shows that a sale happened on that property and the sale was for like 50% maybe of what the market value is. And basically it's one person selling their half of the property to the other person. And so it might be, it might look like they sold it for half the amount, but they already owned the other half before they got started. And so, when it comes down to it and looking at it, and you just have to go beyond the headline, I guess is what it is, to see really what's going on. Maybe there was some kind of water damage in that unit. Maybe there was some kind of a fire. Maybe it's some kind of, the people knew each other and they just said, hey, I'd like to get out of it, or can we still share it, or whatever. Who knows what's going on. But basically the bottom line is that it wasn't a third party transaction where they tried to sell it to somebody in the public. They sold it to somebody that they knew. And, so that's kind of what the bottom line is. So you have to look beyond, and I think that that's really important for people to see. And if you have a question on something, feel free to give me a call or let me know, and I'll be happy to check it out for you and see what's going on, and maybe I'll talk about it here on the show as well. But basically the bottom line is that you definitely need to do your homework when it comes to pricing your property, when it comes to looking at what's going on out there in the marketplace. And it's really good to see, really fun to see. And when I've done some of those disc tests and that kind of stuff, mine comes up as the investigator, that I do like to investigate things, see what's going on, solve the puzzle, and figure it all out. And so that's just one of the things that I like to do, that I think is, good and helps me be better at what I do with all of you guys out there that work with me, is because, we're going in there with our eyes wide open, whether it's something that we're trying to get more money for a property and we can advertise those particular things that are going to stand out, that make ours different than the other properties, or if it's something that we're going to be able to go in there as a buyer and be able to justify some lower cost or something like that because of something that we were able to determine. And so it really depends on who you work with, is what I'm trying to say. And so you've got to make sure that whoever you're working with, that they've got your best interest at heart. And one of the things that I think is so interesting is that people often think that when they're using a realtor, like as a buyer, that all you're doing is opening up the house and showing it to them and all that kind of good stuff. No, there's a lot more that goes into it to make sure that the deal is actually going to happen and that everything is going on. There's a property right now that the closing is delayed. It's not canceled I know that many times it would have been canceled, but it's not canceled. It's delayed. When you've got a business owner, many times everything isn't as clean as it is for a W-2 person. So they had used a lender that we didn't necessarily recommend. We didn't know anything about them. And basically, they didn't honestly know what they were talking about. And so they did a couple of things on the loan that messed it up. So now they had to put it with another lender. They're transferring all the files, transferring all of the appraisals, transferring all of those kinds of things. So it's actually, going to end up fine, and taking an extra week and a half, I think, is all it's going to take, that add on to the time frame, which thankfully doesn't really affect the seller as much as it could have. They're not buying another home right now or anything like that. So it didn't end up being a problem. But, whether it's a lender that you're working with, and we are representing the seller, so we didn't have a lot to say with it. But basically we did our due diligence to check them out, and it seemed like everything was going to be okay. But it obviously wasn't with that particular lender. But now it is. So there's so many stories that I can tell that basically, that you go through, that you always run into something, it seems like, when you're going through a transaction. And what I like to do is solve the problem, and then I'll tell you, hey, we had this little challenge, but it's all resolved, and you don't have to worry about it. I remember there was a couple that I was working with, and they basically, wanted to move back next to their son. And the son's neighbor said, hey, I'll sell you my house. So they thought, okay, well, I don't need a realtor. I could just go ahead and I can do it myself because we already have the house and all of that kind of stuff. It's going to be easy peasy and all of that kind of stuff. They came back to me and they said, Laura, I'm never going to do this again. I'm never going to not use somebody because it was so hard. There were so many things that they ran into, and they were friends, and they wanted to keep that friendship, but there were little things that happened or something in an inspection, and they go, oh, how do we handle this? And it was just a lot more stress, a lot more that they had to go through that they didn't want to and didn't need to. And so you just have to keep that in mind and know that, it's like when you look at the big picture and you think, hey, I'm overpaying for this. You just have to know what you're paying for, and then you'll pay accordingly to whatever, because commissions are definitely negotiable in figuring out what's working and what's right for you and your family. So in order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com, and we will see you after the break. Welcome back, everybody. This is Laura Peterson, your host of Central Florida Real Estate Radio. I'm from Your Home Sold Guaranteed Realty, and to discuss the sale of your home, you can call or text 407-566-2555, and that's 407-566-2555. Well, actually, today is Easter Sunday, and, I know that there are other religious holidays, but Easter is a big one in the Christian world and everything like that. So I thought that I would actually talk about the Easter lily. That's something that I wanted to have an interesting story that kind of went with Easter and everything. And so I hope everybody is having a happy and blessed Easter wherever you're at and however you're celebrating and everything. But the Easter lily has a significant place in the Christian tradition. It symbolizes purity, rebirth, hope, and is often associated with the resurrection of Jesus. Its white color and trumpet shape are also thought to represent the angel's trumpet, and it's a call announcing the resurrection. So while commonly associated with Easter, the lily's origins are from the Ryukyu Islands in southern Japan, and it was introduced in the U.S. in the 1880s. So, like I said, the white color symbolizes the innocence of Christ and the new life offered through his resurrection, and the trumpet shape of the Easter lily is thought to represent the angel's trumpet announcing the resurrection of Jesus. A popular legend suggests that lilies grew in the Garden of Gethsemane after Jesus' crucifixion, springing up from his sweat or blood. How cool is that? I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what one of the legends are. And then it's also considered the white-robed apostle of hope, and that symbolizes the pure and hopeful message of the resurrection. And it came to England in 1819 and in America in the 1880s. So, and there was a boom for the Easter lilies after World War II. Bulb production in the United States and Canada boomed during World War II when supplies for Japan were cut off. Isn't that interesting? I thought that was pretty cool. And then the commercial production started after World War I. A soldier brought lily bulbs to Oregon, and since then, commercial bulb production has been centered in the Pacific Northwest. Now, it's primarily in Oregon and also in Northern California, from my understanding. And the general symbolism is that lilies are generally associated with purity, virtual rebirth and joy in various cultures. So basically, I thought that was a great little message for us today on Easter Sunday and all of that. So I just wanted to wish again everybody a happy and blessed Easter, and hope you have a great time with your family and your friends and out there enjoying the day. So I'm going to call it a day for today. I hope you guys are all having a great day. In order to get in touch with us, you can call or text 407-566-2555. You can find us online at centralfloridarealestateradio.com. And we'll see you next week. Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.